my lawsuit against those scumbags, Julia Black, Henry Blodgett, Business Insider, was thrown out by a federal judge in Boston today. I have all this information that exonerated me, all my communications with the girl after the encounter, with the girls after the encounter. It proves I'm innocent. The judge, it's inadmissible. I could have had a text from the girl to her friend being like, I made it all up. In fact, the judge said that negligence or being bad at your job doesn't prove malice. Like, the girls could tell these stories or whatever they said, and Business Insider could just accept as fact.
So that was Barstool Sports founder Dave Portnoy reacting to a federal court decision to dismiss his defamation lawsuit against Business Insider.
Yeah, the publication ran an article last November alleging Portnoy, the man you saw in the video, had a history of engaging in overly aggressive sexual encounters with young women. While Business Insider never explicitly stated these encounters were non-consensual, the article did suggest these encounters were often violent.
Portnoy has strongly pushed back on these accounts and has produced various messages with women cited in the article that dispute Business Insider's reporting. So we are taking up the case in National Report Court.
To help us break it down, we have Doug Burns. He's a former federal prosecutor. We have Randy Zelin. He is a defense attorney. Thank you both for coming on. We do appreciate that. Talk to me about this, Doug, in this case here. What would be Portnoy's legal options to prove defamation or malice on the part of this publication, Business Insider? As we know, defamation cases, always tough to prove, always tough to win, rather.
Well, I was surprised that the judge dismissed the complaint real quick before I answer your question, because, you know, on a motion to dismiss a complaint, the facts as alleged by the plaintiff actually have to be accepted as true, which is interesting. What the judge did, without getting in the weeds, is he sort of converted this into what we call a motion for summary judgment. And in fact, the judge hung a footnote on page 1 of the opinion saying that he was authorized to look at 4 different categories of documents, essentially beyond the 4 corners of the complaint. So again, a little bit more like a motion for summary judgment. Now, to your question, you're absolutely right. We all know that under New York Times v. Sullivan, seminal Supreme Court case, it's much, much tougher for a public figure to prove defamation. Here, you know, the judge kind of tweaked them a little bit, mildly sarcastically saying, you yourself in your complaint were saying that you're one of the most recognizable figures in Massachusetts as an entrepreneur and a media figure. So therefore, you yourself have made yourself a public figure. And you have to show, again, to answer your question, Sean, actual malice, which is either specific knowledge that it was false or reckless disregard for the truth. And it's very hard.
Randy, what's Business Insider's defense in this case?
Well, I think the judge really did it for them. And what we see here is the price that one individual pays for us living in a free democratic society where you have the right to call me ugly, you have the right to call me a moron, you have the right to speak your mind, and there are no consequences for it. And what the judge basically did, and I'll steal a line from my cousin Vinny, where Judge Chamberlain Haller looked at Mr. Gambini and said, listen, I think what you want to do is you want to skip over the arraignment, skip over the trial, get right to a verdict, and your client, the case is dismissed. And what the judge here said, we're not even going to look at whether or not the statements are true or false. And we're going to simply look at the question of malice. Did the Business Insider act with malice? Did they act with evil intent? To Doug's point, did they publish this knowing that it was not true, or did they publish it closing their eyes to the high probability that what they were writing wasn't true? And critically here, I think what saved the Business Insider was the fact that they went to Mr. Portnoy and said, listen, we'd love to have a sit down with you. We'd love to interview you. And after he said no, they came back and said, here's 38 points that we're going to be raising. We'd like a response from you. And then when Mr. Portnoy found out that this article was coming out, he still had the opportunity to come forward. And as a public figure, the law says, listen, you've got resources. You've got the ability to get in front of something. If you choose not to, don't come crying to us after it's already published and then say, well, wait a minute, this isn't fair. And basically what the judge said, listen, pal, you had your opportunity beforehand to go to the Business Insider and say, guys, you're wrong. And if you publish this, you're going to have a problem because here's my proof that everything you're saying is actually false.
Well, so Doug, so it gets to the point where, and I think about Johnny Depp, right? If you watch that Amber Heard trial, he spent all of his money really just trying to clear his name. That essentially was the importance there. So Portnoy can clear his. I mean, he's talking about text messages that he allegedly has. I mean, he could publish some of this. I mean, how does he clear his name, Doug?
Well, you're right, Sean. You have two arenas. Obviously, you have the court system, courtrooms, and then you also have the public square, I'll call it, which is, social media, other media, public relations, and so on. So if he feels that strongly that he wants to be vindicated on these particular facts, then I think he's going to pursue a very, very vigorous campaign of getting out, the message that this stuff was false.
Do you think, Randy, he could go after these women, I guess if they're anonymous in the article, if he would find a way to sort of identify who would have sat down for these interviews with Business Insider, would he, go after them in a legal manner?
It's a fabulous point. And what's interesting about this case is, to your point, Mr. Portnoy did not sue the women, claiming that what the women said was false and it was capable of being proven true or false. He sued the publication. So there's a different standard, there's a different burden of proof, there's a different road to navigate. What he would need to do is, since these women are anonymous, he would basically have to start an action by saying, listen, Judge, I have a cause of action against people, but I need to know their names. And it's something along the lines of, and it's common sense, I need discovery before I can file suit. The problem for him will be that if he's going to sue the publication saying I need this information, they will certainly say, well, you ain't getting it because we have a privilege and our sources can remain privileged. So he would have to find another avenue, find other people who would know the real names of these people. And by the way, he must know the names of the real people because he slept with them. So what he really needs to do, if the statute of limitations hasn't already run, he needs to sue them.
All right, we'll leave it right there. Out of time. We appreciate both of you for essentially dissecting this case. Doug Burns, Randy Zelin, we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
No crooked establishment.
None of that twisting the truth. No talking down to me.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
Don't tell me how to think.
I trust Newsmax.
Newsmax.
They don't tell me how to think.
They let
me decide.
Newsmax.
Real news
for real people.